Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another session of the Pursuit Power Half Hour. I'm Banoo, and I'm joined today by Anish Udayakumar, Senior VP and Head of Product and Customer Experience at Provus. Today, we want to tackle one of the biggest challenges faced by professional services organizations, unpredictable projects. Engagements often start with a solid plan informed by the sold scope, but as projects kick off and progress, teams have difficulty predicting project performance, and often they identify scope creep and resource fatigue and suboptimal performance when it is way too late. This undermines profits, strains resources, and leaves clients wondering when and if they will get to outcomes with their investment. So in this session, we'll be talking about practical ways to manage that unpredictability and close the gap between scoping and execution. We'll cover how to standardize scope while still allowing for flexibility, align pricing with real delivery data, identify margin risk earlier in the project lifecycle, and use AI and historical insights to improve quoting accuracy and delivery predictability. So no one better than our guest today, Anish, to tackle some of these challenges and problems and leave you with some tangible ways to address them. So thank you, Anish, for making the time. Welcome.
Hi, Banoo. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be part of this. Like I said, really looking forward to kind of diving deep into this conversation.
Awesome. Let's get started by having you introduce yourselves to the listeners. If you can tell us a little bit about your background, even maybe a little bit about Provus as a company before we dive in and tackle some of the questions.
Great. So my name is Anish Udayakumar. I'm Senior Vice President of Product Management and Customer Experience here at Provus. Provus is an AI-first quoting platform. We are purpose-built for services. We help services organizations drive efficiency, accuracy, and profitability. From a seller perspective and a delivery manager perspective, we help them create accurate quotes, price them smarter, close deals faster, and also preserve margins. Typically, customers reach out to us when they want to transform a legacy process, which is typically disconnected. And then traditionally, we see that it being managed through email, spreadsheets, and stuff. Right? So we bring all of that together and provide a single, unified, intelligent platform for services quoting. Right. So that's kind of my background, and happy to partake in this discussion.
So you have a very important perspective that really kicks off the whole delivery process, right, around that scoping and scoping accuracy. So I'd like to start off by getting your perspective on why you think we face this issue with unpredictability in projects, even when they start with strong plans and healthy margins.
Delivery as a business process itself is so nuanced, right? It comes with a litany of internal and external variables which affect product outcomes. So whenever you're a project manager trying to execute a project, you need to balance all of these variables to ensure that you get to the right outcomes. So you're right. Typically when we start the project, you have a resource plan which is defined. We'll have strong margins to start up with, but before even you know it, slowly the margin gets eroded, during the execution cycle. And the focus point here is not that the margin is getting eroded. You don't know it. And it's almost every time a little too late when you really realize that, right? So that also leads into this unpredictability from an outcome perspective. Overall, from a process side also, it is very difficult to isolate and fix the root cause of margin erosion, right? So when you add these up, when you go project to project, it widens the gap between what was sold and what was delivered, adding more uncertainty to the organization as a whole. So that is kind of where it kind of all starts.
What are the operational factors that most commonly lead to this unpredictability in your mind?
So when you talk about selling and scoping and actually delivering, it's a big business process. There's a lot of handshakes involved in this business process, and a lot of people have to talk to each other. A lot of tools have to talk to each other. So the opportunity has to get to the quote has to get to the project, sales has to talk to delivery has to talk to ops. So all of these factors have to kind of really happen in this operational process. So if we just take scoping and estimation as a starting point, there is a lot of art and a lot of science involved in this process. Right? So typically what happens is when two individuals who are maybe estimating the same project can end up coming up with totally different estimates from a price perspective and effort perspective for the same project. So we've seen this happen quite often in larger organizations when you are onboarding a newer sales team, or you just ramped up a sales team on a new business process, right? So it is difficult for them to kind of come up to speed and have that institutional knowledge readily available. So as a result, what happens is this operational process alignment or misalignment, so to speak, drives margins to be lesser, and obviously the customer pays less and we leave money on the table. So that's kind of one part from a scoping perspective. Then going a little deeper into actual estimation, right? So typically we have to identify the right solutions to the right problems. So that means, do I have the right resources for the right tasks? Am I estimating my project durations correctly? Am I incorporating the right level of contingencies in my project to ensure a successful outcome? But it is rarely that case. So there's always this misalignment between pricing and scoping assumptions versus the actual reality when it comes to delivery, right? So this is upfront in the process. When we go downstream more into project execution, if I'm a project manager trying to execute my project, I have very limited visibility into margins. I know that I need to execute this project at, say, 30% margin, but I do not know the detail. This task, what should be the margin? At end of 1 month, what should be the margin? That visibility is not there. Then when you start a project or when you're planning for a project, the lack of forecast visibility on resources. When do I need to have the resource ready? When a project is started, you kind of know, but what if 10 projects are in pipeline, and how do you really manage and map it, right? So that's a big thing that we have seen in the market. And there are a lot of problems, but unless you provide the project manager with actionable insights on how do you address and solve some of these problems, it is never going to be a good outcome, right? So lack of that actionable insights also adds up to these operational problems. And finally, we need to have a point where there is clear translation between what was sold and what was delivered, and that metric should be available at all levels, which is definitely not there in typical systems. So these would be the main, there's a bunch more, but these would be the main things I have seen from an operational perspective, like driving these kind of unpredictable outcomes.
You know, a common theme that I take away from what you just talked through, right, is the fact that if you haven't approached your quote to cash on service delivery as a seamless process with a seamless set of tools that are enabling that seamless process, that's when your unpredictability at each of these points could fall apart, because it's not a seamless process looping information right from delivery back to scoping, from scoping to delivery and resources, making sure that all resources are engaged. We, as a matter of fact, in Kantata, one of the things we do with our customers in some frequency is do what we call a business process workshop, which takes us from quote to cash to make sure that the customer is continuously looking at using Kantata in a seamless manner, right? To enable that. Because unless all of these parts are intentionally speaking to each other, you're not going to have predictability in the process. Somewhere it's going to not give you the forecastable information that you need to be able to execute accordingly, right? So with that, just if you can, let us know how organizations can better connect scoping, pricing, delivery to reduce the unpredictability in products.
in essence, the bottom line is that you need to be able to connect the systems, which is a given thing, but also how do you learn from your past execution? How do you get the data back and be better from a process standpoint? So a connected system helps you in like few different ways, right? So going back to starting of scoping and estimation, right? So we always want to kind of strive towards standardizing the scoping process. So what does that mean? So we talked about there's an art part of it and then there's a science part of it. So when you standardize the scoping process, what you're trying to do is standardize the science part for everybody. So no matter who goes in, no matter who does the scoping based on these parameters, this is going to be the effort, this is going to be the price, and this is going to be the duration. Then you can put your own flavor or nuance to it in the art format, right? So we want to ensure that there is absolute flexibility in that way, but aligned with standardization. You typically don't get that in a manual Excel or a one-off tool in an estimation side. And we will be able to only do it when there is a connected system. So for example, if I initiate a project and I'm estimating that it's going to take 6 months, but from an actual delivery perspective, it took 9 months, my standardized science of estimation should understand that, okay, typically projects of this complexity take more. So my template or the logic has to incorporate that nuance, right? So that's one. Then where typical systems kind of tend to kind of fail is when you are not able to enforce or enable that collaboration between the teams. So sales has a specific outcome in terms of I want to kind of close my deal, I want to get my incentive done, and I'm done. Delivery teams, they want to ensure that, hey, there is enough resources, enough delivery time so that I, as the delivery owner, can deliver the right outcomes to my customer. So in a way, they have some kind of competing priorities. Somebody wants to do it faster to close the deal. Somebody wants to do it right. Again, both of them are aligned from an org perspective, but how do we enable both of these personas to get the right outcome in the business process? And that will only happen through a connected system. So the primary vehicle or primary living space of the delivery team is PSA like Kantata, right? And the primary living space of a seller is going to be Provus and the opportunity. So how do we bridge that gap and how do we enable that collaboration between the two platforms? That's very, very important. And you made the point about the data feedback loop, right? How do we align pricing to the right scoping and the resource assumptions? And all of this should be driven based on real performance data in the execution system. And the only way to get that is getting it back from the PSA system to the CPQ system, right? So that connectivity is enabled. So that's kind of what I'll call out.
I love the fact that, technology is an enabler, but in this case, it's almost a connector between two organizations that may have conflicting objectives and incentive plans, right? Sales driven by commission. And we know there's different models, different listeners have different models on how they're incentivizing their sales organization on service revenue. But then there is delivery that is totally, their outcome, they're focused on business outcomes for their customers, meeting their margin tag, etc. So what I think I heard you say is that really technology can bring those two together, because inevitably the two organizations have different mandates, so they will have different incentives and different sort of business objectives that they're aiming for. Did I hear you correctly?
Absolutely right. So the key here is how do we use the technology and the tools available in our fingers to really enable that collaboration, right? Because ultimately the work is going to be done by people. So how does technology enable the outcomes which are aligned to both the teams, right? To the delivery teams, the sales teams, and also let's not forget the operations and the finance teams, right? Because the finance teams want to make sure that we are not selling anything which is below margin. We are ensuring that we keep resource availability forecast in check so that we are not also going and committing things which we cannot deliver. So sales, delivery, and operations, all three personas will have an equitable role in delivering successful outcomes for our customers.
I want to pause a minute on another very important point you raise, which is around tying in resource availability, skill set, capacity, as you are from the very beginning, as you're scoping to ensure that continuous continuous success, I should say, to ultimately meet the customer outcomes, right? I love that because that's so critical. Now, some of our listeners may have a centralized resource management organization. They may not. It may be in tangent with the delivery organization. But regardless, I guess the technology will close that gap or make it seamless. So if you can just spend a little bit more time on the criticality of visibility of capacity and skill set availability while we're creating that
Yes.
quote
So
and scope.
see, in this new world where everybody wants to kind of solve everything with AI, right? So the skill set which is required for somebody to kind of analyze data and maybe do an AI transformation is very critical. Everybody wants it, as we all know, right? If our sales team is working on 10 different deals where everybody wants an AI architect to kind of come and engage on your project, but the resources are limited. So how do you ensure that at the time of scoping we give the right visibility on who is available, what is available to the seller, but in the same time push that data even before the quote is approved or the SOW is signed to the resourcing team and the centralized HR side that, hey, here are 10 projects which are coming up in our pipeline in the next 6 months. I would need 3 architects to be available by June, right? So that data is so critical because it is not just about project execution from a project management perspective. There is also an inroad into HR and hiring, right? Because what if all the 10 of these deals close?
Yeah.
We are not going to tell the customer, hey, wait, I need 5 more weeks to get a resource, right? So the customers are never going to agree to that. So the earlier we send that kind of forecastable data from when it comes to resources downstream, it will help manage your kind of pipeline in terms of what resources should be available. It also gives your HR and hiring team a head start on here is where the market is going. Here are the kind of resources. So they can, let's say, get some consultants in or hire permanent people as they need. So similar to kind of what we talk about revenue forecasting, which everybody loves, right? Our CRO will obviously love us when we say, okay, I'm planning for a $10 million quarter, right? I'm going to make 35% margin. It is equally important for the delivery and the operations teams to understand that, hey, for making this $10 million at 35% margin, I need 15 resources of this skill set to be available, right? So resource and revenue forecasts go hand in hand, right? Again, it's just the consumers are kind of different. So as the sales leadership would forecast and kind of align on here is my outcomes in terms of forecasting revenue, delivery and kind of the resourcing team can really forecast and kind of map it. So it also gives the executive leadership team a good point of view on, hey, where is the resource needs coming in? What is the trend going on in the market? Right now, sadly, it is a very disconnected process, right? Because if you as a seller is doing all of this in an Excel sheet, nobody knows, hey, what kind of resources are needed. And typically what happens is when the project is about to start or the SOW is about to sign, that is when phone calls start going, oh, I need a resource in 3 weeks to staff this and they have to be on site. So that is always a panic, right? So having that connected system, especially from a resourcing perspective, forecasting perspective, helps ease and makes our life so much more predictable, right? And we don't want any quarter end surprises. Oh, where am I going to hire this new person? So all of that problems are going to really go away, right, with a connected system.
Yeah. One of the challenges, like historically in my PS leadership roles that I've faced, was that intentional training plan where you add 1 or 2 headcounts because you want them as part of the project to learn. Imagine in the world that you're painting for us, you're actually making that seamless in that you're building that cross training possibly into your scope. So you're setting expectation up front, which will make it much more effective, right? Because doing a project where you haven't anticipated that investment of resources to cross train and provide the skill sets on future projects, by planning it ahead as part of the scope, it just makes it so much more effective to do that. So I love that connection, and what the technology role will be in that.
Yeah. And to that point, right, Banu, right? The timing is one aspect, right? But you touched upon an important point of data capture as well, right? So if you are a delivery leader who's trying to structure a specific project, you will also have the ability to say that, yep, these are the specific skills I need for this role. So then if this data goes downstream, the resource manager can understand, hey, is this a skill which is cross trainable, or is it something I have to only hire, right? So all the data which is being captured upfront in terms of what kind of resource, when does this resource have to start, what kind of certifications, what kind of skills are really required to achieve this outcome, all that would also be sent downstream. So just to kind of make sure that there is complete homogeneous data push from code all the way to the PSA project.
I love it. Anish, to bring this home, I know a lot of our listeners can relate to the pain points we've just set out and sort of high level what needs to be done. But just to our service leaders who are looking to transform their delivery experience, what would your guidance be? Where should they start, and what are the business outcomes they can expect?
So first of all, to all our listeners, again, services leaders who are trying to kind of do a transformation of their business processes, you're not alone, right? It is a systemic problem, right? A lot of companies go through this, and then we definitely want to kind of make sure that this is well understood, right? So even if we think that, hey, my organization has a very specific business process, so my problems are unique, the reality is that is not the case, right? So there's a systemic challenge which we face across the services industry, and you're at a good place to kind of start. So first and foremost, I would say that, again, everything starts with people, right? So we need to kind of foster a deeper collaboration between sales and delivery. That's an easier thing said than done. So what you need to do is first invest on a platform or a unified data platform which programmatically connects all these key personas together. Because if I am a seller, I work on my Excel sheet or my custom tool and I'm done, then I call you, Banoo, who is going to be doing delivery, and you are in your own world. What if there is a way in which we both have to work together, and the tool and the system and the platform is enabling that? The data I am playing with is the same data you are playing with. So there is no latency, there is no handoff, right? So fostering that deeper collaboration becomes much easier. So first point is to start investing on a platform or a unified data solution which really helps that collaboration. So that's the first thing I would say. The next piece for to kind of start this journey is be intentional in removing islands of automation, right? So it is so critical that we are all working in a connected system, right? So the point about collaboration I made earlier is a nirvana stage where everybody's working on the same code, everybody's working on the same project. But where do you start? First, you break down those islands of automation, right? So first, you have to invest on a connected system, right? So you already have systems, make sure that they are connected. There is no manual processes involved. At least if they are, have a roadmap to kind of get them into connected hands, right? So right from the services opportunity to the code to the project. And ultimately, this connection is going to make sure that you have fewer quadrant surprises, right? You will be good in terms of that. So Provus and Kantata, we both are purpose built for services. So we have been in the market solving these specific problems day in and day out, right? So our joint solution does address all the pain points kind of be listed. And our ultimate goal is to enable a scalable path to predictable and profitable growth, right? So reach out to us if you need help in setting forward and taking the first step towards automation and predictability in customer outcomes.
Thanks again for joining us today. I hope you got as much out of this session as I did. Anish, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're very busy, and I appreciate you joining us and spending time to discuss this topic.
Thank you.
If you're interested in seeing how Kantata and Provus together can help your business be more predictable and always deliver amazing, please stick around, and one of our solution engineers will walk you through a quick demo. Thank you again.
Hi everyone, I'm Vicky, and I'm going to walk you through a quick demo of how a Provus quote syncs to Kantata through our on-platform integration. This integration transforms quote data into a Kantata project structure tailored to each customer's unique business needs. Provus and Kantata work closely during implementation to ensure everything aligns with how your organization operates. The result: a seamless handoff from sales to delivery, reducing unpredictability and closing the gap between what's sold and what's delivered. As you can see, the following demo shows how easy it is for an end user to click a button called Create Kantata Project directly within a Provus quote in order to create the project in Kantata. Now when I go to my opportunity, as we can see here, there is no proposal or project in Kantata within the opportunity. But as I refresh the page, now you can see that everything from the Provus quote that is needed in Kantata, the total amount, the number of hours, the margin, the resources needed for this project have been automatically created inside of Kantata. Simple as that. If you would like to learn more about Kantata and how we can help your business connect everything from scoping to resourcing to forecasting so you can always deliver amazing, please schedule a personalized demo with us.